Two humans stand barefoot in the shade of a garden that is rapidly dying. The dirt under their heels is no longer just soil. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. There it is. The first promise, Genesis 3:15, is dragged into the dirt, forced to watch his sons die, and then blinded and bound in heavy bronze shackles, the seed vanishes into the dark of exile. The tree of David is chopped down. Nothing is left but a stump. And then, silence. 400 years of deafening, suffocating silence. The sky turns to brass. Prophets stop speaking. Generations live and die under Persian decrees, Greek swords, and the crushing weight of Roman taxes. The collective nation of Israel is fractured. They are bruised. They are waiting for a massive political uprising. An army of millions to rise up and restore the plural, collective offspring of Abraham. But decades after, a man from Nazareth is crucified on a Roman cross. A Jewish scholar named Paul sits down with a piece of parchment. He looks back at the ancient Hebrew grammar of Genesis, and he writes a sentence that shatters thousands of years of misunderstanding. Galatians chapter 3, verse 16. The Apostle Paul is writing to early Christians scattered across the harsh, rocky terrain of the Roman province of Galatia. These people are deeply confused about how to inherit the blessing of Abraham. They assume they need to adopt the cultural markers of Judaism. They look at the ancient texts and assume the promise belongs to the massive, plural, collective. Most people read this moment in the text as a vague, poetic guarantee that good will eventually triumph over evil. Paul picks up a reed pen, dips it in dark gallnut ink, and writes a sentence that retroactively decodes thousands of years of human history. He writes, "Now the promises were made to Abraham and to his offspring." It does not say, "and to offsprings," referring to many, but referring to one, "and to your offspring," who is Christ. The word Paul uses for offspring here is the Greek sperma. It is the exact Greek equivalent of the Hebrew Zera. It appears 43 times in the New Testament, and its primary meaning is agricultural, the germ of a plant, the kernel sown into the earth. It also carries the unmistakable biological weight of human reproduction. But Paul exploits the grammatical ambiguity of the word to make a stunning theological claim. He reaches all the way back to the collective, noun of Genesis, and he points a laser directly at the singular interpretation. That grammatical shift changes everything. For centuries, the nation of Israel believed they were the point of the story. They thought the massive, million-strong demographic was the ultimate weapon against the serpent. But Israel was simply the protective casing. Think about the physical mechanics of a seed. The hard outer shell exists for one reason: to protect the living embryo inside as it travels through a hostile environment. Israel was the shell, a broad, encouraging promise that humanity will always fight against the darkness. And one day, the darkness will lose. They absorbed the famines, the swords of Babylon, and the heavy iron decrees of Rome, protecting the singular life hidden inside their bloodline. When Jesus is born in Bethlehem, smelling of damp straw and animal breath, the shell has done its job. The seed is not a biological inheritance you are born into. It is a specific person you must be grafted into. Every prophecy, every surviving infant, every narrow escape in the Old Testament was not about preserving a nation for the sake of a nation. It was about preserving the shell until the singular seed was finally delivered onto the battlefield. Jesus of Nazareth is the singularity. He is the one stepping out to crush the serpent's head. But a terrifying reality governs the agricultural world. If you have a singular seed, and you want that seed to actually produce life, if you cannot keep it safe on a pedestal, you cannot protect it from the elements. A seed kept in the warm light of a kitchen window does nothing. To unleash what is inside, you have to bury it in the dirt. A hammer strikes iron. Bone shatters. Blood hits the dry dirt of Golgotha. The sky turns pitch black in the middle of the afternoon. The earth violently fractures. The seed is falling. Look closely at the mechanics of the cross. The serpent has finally caught the target. But if you look closer at the grammar of the original language, at the precise way, this one specific noun, the manhunt spanning thousands of years, culminates on a rocky hill outside Jerusalem. The iron nail drives through the flesh. Genesis 3:15 is happening in real time. The heel is bruised. The heel is crushed. The pain is white-hot and blinding. But to crush the heel, the serpent must place its head under the foot. Jesus breathes his last. His chest stops moving. The Roman guards pull the body down. The skin is cold. The blood is drying on the rough wood. They wrap him in linen and carry him away. They bring him to a garden. The story began in a garden, and the climax returns to one. They carry the body into a cave carved from solid rock. The heavy smell of myrrh and aloes hangs in the damp air. They roll a massive, circular stone across the entrance. The grinding sound echoes against the limestone. The darkness inside the tomb is absolute. The cold is total. Friday evening fades into the dark. Saturday morning breaks over a quiet city. Saturday night falls, with Roman guards standing outside the sepulchre, shifting their weight in the chill. The enemy watches the stones settle into the dirt. The serpent exhales. The threat is over. The singular target is dead. The soil that drank Abel's blood has finally swallowed the Savior's blood, is tracked through the bloodlines of the Middle East. You start to see something the generic reading completely misses. The grave is not a victory for the snake. It is an incubator. Jesus himself predicted this exact physical mechanic just days earlier. He stood before a crowd and said, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone." The singularity of the seed is its power, but it is also its limitation. A single kernel of wheat resting on a table feeds no one. It must be thrown into the dark. Its outer shell must violently rupture. It must undergo the trauma of burial to release the biological explosion trapped inside. The cold stone of the tomb presses against the linen. The earth holds its breath. 3 days pass in suffocating silence. Then, the shell breaks. The ground shakes again. The stone is violently thrown back. Morning light floods the limestone cave. The linen wrappings collapse flat against the slab. Entirely empty. The seed does not just survive the dirt. It conquers the dirt. But the resurrection is only the first phase of the agricultural cycle. Because when a seed dies and rises, it never comes back up the same way it went down. When you walk through a field of wheat just before the harvest, you are looking at a mathematical impossibility. You hold a rough, golden husk in your hand. You can feel the sharp bristles against your skin. The seed is not a collective metaphor. It is a singular target. What happens in the shadows of Eden? Inside that single head of grain are 40, 50, maybe 60 exact replicas of the original seed that was buried months earlier. The singular kernel went into the cold, wet soil. Its outer shell violently ruptured in the dark. But when it pushed back through the crust of the earth as a green shoot, it did not come back alone. The resurrection is not just a miracle of survival. It is an engine of multiplication. This is the final, brilliant twist in the grammar of the biblical text. Paul continues his thought in the book of Galatians. He has just finished proving that Jesus is the singular, exclusive sperma of Abraham. He has narrowed the focus of thousands of years of human history down to one Jewish carpenter. But then, just a few paragraphs later, at the end of the chapter, Paul writes this, "And if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's seed, and heirs according to promise." The singular noun suddenly explodes back into the plural, but it bypasses human biology entirely for thousands of years. The serpent tracked a physical bloodline, looking for a genetic marker. He focused all his venom on one singular target. But by dragging that target into the limestone grave, the enemy accidentally planted the very thing that would finally defeat him. Imagine the absolute terror is not the prediction of a religious philosophy. It is the drawing of a battle map of the dark forces in the decades following the empty tomb. They spent 4 millennia tracking a single family through the dusty ridges of Canaan. They monitored the wombs of Hebrew women, They controlled the thrones of sprawling empires just to keep the bloodline under surveillance. Now, suddenly, the seed is springing up in Roman bathhouses, in Greek marketplaces, and in the royal chariots of Ethiopia. It is entirely untrackable. The promise is no longer a physical bloodline confined to the Middle East. It is a phantom harvest spreading across the entire globe. You cannot eradicate it by cutting off a single royal lineage. You cannot starve it with a localized famine. You cannot destroy it by burning down a temple of cedar and gold. Every time the enemy tries to crush this new, multiplied seed with the heavy iron of Roman persecution or the fires of martyrdom, the shell simply breaks again, and the seed multiplies further. The target is now everywhere. But if the seed has already multiplied, and if the serpent's head has already been crushed under the heavy timber of the cross, what exactly is the harvest waiting for as the pages of the Bible draw to a close? A promise is spoken to a serpent in the dust of Eden, and a cosmic manhunt begins. God is placing a cosmic bounty on a very specific, unbroken line of descent. From this exact moment forward, a father raises a heavy iron blade on Mount Moriah, and the bloodline survives by the width of a heartbeat. A Hebrew grammar hides a singular king inside a sprawling nation, and the ancient enemy hunts the wrong target. A murderous queen swings swords in a royal nursery, and a single infant sleeps safely in the smoke of the temple. A scholar picks up a reed pen in Galatia, and thousands of years of human history are retroactively decoded. A singular kernel of wheat is buried in a limestone cave, and the earth violently shakes. A shell breaks in the absolute dark, and a harvest explodes across the entire globe. Same promise. Same God. But here's the part I keep coming back to. The sheer vulnerability of the dirt. When the singular seed, the one the universe had waited millennia for, finally arrived, he was not placed in an impenetrable fortress. He was nailed to rough wood, wrapped in cold linen, and pressed back into the earth. The very soil that was cursed in Genesis 3 became the incubator for the cure. If you are in a season, the biblical narrative ceases to be a random collection of moral fables, disconnected wars, and impossible genealogies, where it feels like you have been buried if the heavy stone has been rolled across your life and the darkness feels absolute. Do not mistake the planting for a grave. The darkness is not a burial. It is a necessary fracture, the outer shell of your comfort. Your carefully constructed plans, or your autonomy might be breaking apart in the cold, but the trauma of the soil is the exact mechanism required to release the life trapped inside. If this opens something in you, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like they are buried right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient texts. And may the God who never once abandoned the fragile thread of his promise sit with you in the dark soil and bring you out of the ground, carrying a harvest you could not have produced any other way. It becomes a manhunt. The enemy is listening in the garden. The dark forces of the ancient world now know exactly what they are looking for. It is a fracture. A serpent coils in the dust, its belly pressed against the newly cursed earth. They are looking for the seed. This reality changes how you read every chapter that follows. It changes how you understand every barren womb in the book of Genesis. It changes how you view every slaughtered infant in Egypt, every famine in Canaan, and every violent assassination attempt on the royal throne of Jerusalem. These are not random tragedies of the ancient world. They are surgical strikes. The serpent is trying to sever the line. To trace this word through the text is to watch a single, fragile thread pulled through the most violent eras of human history, constantly under threat, constantly surviving by a margin of inches. But to feel the true terror of how vulnerable this promise actually is, you cannot fast forward to the end of the story. You have to step just outside the flaming swords of Eden, where the very first mother holds her firstborn son. Convinced the war is already won, the first cry of a newborn outside of Eden feels like victory. Eve looks at Cain, her firstborn, the child of the soil, and she makes an assumption that makes perfect historical sense. She thinks he is the one, the snake crusher, the promised seed who will reverse the curse, the air, which only hours ago held the perfect warmth of unbroken creation, is suddenly sharp and cold, and lead them back through the flaming swords. But turn the page, and you see the serpent's counter-strategy activate immediately. Cain does not crush the serpent. He crushes his brother, the dirt of the earth, cursed in Genesis 3, opens its mouth in Genesis 4 to drink Abel's warm blood. The line is seemingly severed before it even begins. And from this moment, the narrative architecture of the Old Testament shifts to accommodate a manhunt. If you have ever tried to read the Bible straight through, you have hit the genealogies, the long, dry, repetitive lists of names. This man lived this many years, and he begat this son, and then he died. Modern readers instinctively skim these pages. We see them as ancient filing cabinets, tedious administrative records taking up space before the actual story resumes. The genealogies are not just ancient birth records, they are a survival log. They are a spotlight tracking a single drop of blood through centuries of famine, flood, and war. When you read those lists, imagining the dark ink scratched onto parchment, reciting the names of men who lived and died in relative obscurity, you are watching the seed inch its way through a hostile world. Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel. The rhythm of the names is the pulse of the promise keeping itself alive. Every time a generation passes, the same question hangs in the text. Is this the one? Is this the offspring who will finally step on the serpent's neck? You can hear the frantic rustle of fig leaves as the man and the woman attempt to cover their bodies. When God drowns the world in a flood, the seed is confined to the wooden planks of a floating ark. When the nations scatter at Babel, the seed is hidden in the confusion of new languages. The biblical authors are obsessive with their lists because they are documenting the chain of custody for the salvation of the world. But as the centuries pass, the threat to the promise evolves. The enemy realizes he does not always need an assassination to stop the line. Sometimes, he just needs time. He just needs biology to fail. The spotlight tracks through the ancient Near East until it stops on an aging man and a barren woman, packing their tents in the dry, blinding heat of the Mesopotamian sun. God is about to narrow the focus of the seed to one specific family. But he is going to do it in a way that requires an impossible biological contradiction. To prove who is really orchestrating the bloodline, God waits until the womb is entirely dead. The gravel crunches under their sandals. The wind howls across the limestone ridges of Mount Moriah. 3 days of walking, 3 days of silence. An old man climbs with a fire in his hand and a heavy knife at his belt. A young boy walks beside him. The boy's shoulders ache. He carries the rough weight of split wood. Dust clings to the sweat on their faces. The heat radiates off the rock, shivering not just from the wind, but from the terrifying, crushing weight of what they have just shattered. But the boy carries something much heavier than firewood. He carries the weight of the universe. Isaac is the miracle. He is the impossible son born to a dead womb. He is the living, breathing continuation of the Eden promise. He is the seed, and God has just asked Abraham to slaughter him. The air grows thin, the sun burns their necks. They reach the summit. Abraham builds an altar of unhewn stones. He arranges the wood. He binds the boy. The coarse ropes cut into Isaac's wrists. The boy is laid over the timber. The father raises the iron blade. The metal glints in the midday sun. Think about this exact moment from the serpent's perspective. The dark forces of the ancient world hold their breath. The long, exhausting manhunt is finally over. The enemy does not even have to send an assassin. He does not need to orchestrate a famine or a flood. The Father is going to sever the line himself. The promise of Eden is about to bleed out on the rocks. The knife is not a mere test of devotion. It is a collision of divine promises. God explicitly said that through Isaac, the seed would be named, but God also commanded Abraham to offer him as a burnt sacrifice. The only way both realities remain true is if the boy comes back from the ash. The silence of the afternoon is broken by a voice. God speaks into the twilight. He does not start his judgment by addressing the man. Abraham lifts his arm, fully expecting a resurrection. The blade hangs in the air. A voice shatters the silence. Abraham, Abraham. The knife stops. The boy exhales. There is a frantic rustling in the brush. A ram is caught by its horns in a thicket. Blood is spilled on the altar today, smelling of copper and smoke. But it is not the blood of the heir. The seed survives. The boy walks down the mountain. The line holds. Isaac will grow. He will marry. He will father twins. The blessing will pass to Jacob, then to Judah, pushing violently forward through the centuries. The singular family will eventually explode into a nation of millions. But as the story shifts from one nomad's tent into a sprawling empire, a strange linguistic mystery emerges in the ancient scrolls. To see it, you have to look at the exact Hebrew word God uses when he speaks to Abraham under the stars. There is a detail hiding in plain sight in the grammar. Genesis chapter 15, verse 5. God brings Abraham out of his tent under the cold, sprawling night sky of the ancient Near East. The air is sharp. God points to the stars, scattered like crushed glass across the black expanse. And he says, "So shall your offspring be." He does not start by addressing the woman. He turns his attention to the dust, to the creature in the dirt. The word translated offspring or descendants here is the Hebrew Zera. Its primary, literal meaning is agricultural, a physical grain of wheat or barley pressed into the dark, wet mud of the Levant. But in the ancient world, it also became the dominant idiom for human reproduction, for bloodlines, and generations yet unborn. It appears over 200 times in the Old Testament. But here is the linguistic tension. In Hebrew, Zera is a collective noun. It functions exactly like the English word sheep. If I point to a hillside and say, "Look at the sheep," am I pointing to a sprawling flock of 300 grazing in the grass? Or am I pointing to one solitary animal standing by a rock? The noun does not change. The grammar deliberately hides the scope. This ambiguity changes how the entire Old Testament is lived out. For thousands of years, Israel believed the Zera was strictly plural, a massive, unstoppable demographic that would overwhelm the earth by sheer force of numbers. If seeing the mechanics of the ancient language suddenly shifts how you read a story you thought you knew, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. He declares a war that will span millennia, collapse empires, and rewrite the geography of the earth. So the nation of Israel multiplies. Assuming the promise is entirely about them, they become a kingdom. They forge weapons of iron and build a temple of cedar and gold. Smelling of incense and burning fat, they assume the plural mass of Israel is the ultimate fulfillment of the Edenic prophecy. They think their sheer numbers will eventually crush the serpent. The seed is not a demographic. It is a single king. God is using a grammatical double meaning. Yes, Abraham will have millions of descendants, like the stars. But the promise to crush the head of the serpent was never distributed to the masses. It is held by the singular. The spotlight must narrow again. And as the focus tightens, from a nation of millions down to a single, anointed throne in the city of Jerusalem, the ancient enemy finally sees the target. The palace floors of Jerusalem are slick with warm blood. A queen walks through the corridors of power, giving a singular, unthinkable order: destroy the royal family. Her name is Athaliah. The year is 841 BC. She is not merely securing a political throne, she is functioning as the serpent's blade. She is trying to sever the line. Centuries earlier, God had made a covenant with King David. He says, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed," a promise whispered into the royal courts. God told David, "I will raise up your seed after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom forever." The target was placed directly on the throne. And so the enemy strikes the throne. Swords swing in the royal nursery. The heirs are systematically butchered. But a priest's wife grabs one single infant, Joash, one fragile, tiny chest, rising and falling. She hides him in a bedroom. She smuggles him into the temple of God. For 6 years, the boy lives in the shadows of the holy place. He sleeps smelling the heavy smoke of frankincense. He walks barefoot on the cold stone floors. He listens to the rhythmic chants of the priests, while a murderous queen sits oblivious on the throne outside. The promise of Eden survives by the width of a single heartbeat. The crown is not a guarantee of safety. It is a cosmic bullseye. Watch the violent rhythm of the centuries that follow. When the Assyrian war machine surrounds the walls of Jerusalem, choking off the water supply, the seed is trapped. When the Babylonian Empire smashes through the bronze gates and sets fire to the cedar panels of the temple, the seed is carried away in the ash. When Zedekiah, the last reigning king of Judah,